Good evening and welcome to What's Your Story? What images come to mind when you hear the word witch? Are they good images or bad images? What do you really know about witchcraft and witches? Do you have an open mind? Are you willing to learn? My guest tonight is Phoenix Moon. She identifies herself as a witch. She openly practices witchcraft. She drove herself, nope, she didn't come in on a broom. She drove herself here to share her story with us. Sit back, listen, and learn. Welcome to the show, Phoenix.
Thank you.
Glad to do part 2 with you of this. So let's get right to it. What is a spell book?
Spell book is what we actually call our book of shadows usually. We take and put in there anything to do with the witchcraft. We'll have our spells in there. We'll have our rituals in there. We'll take and have different correspondences, which are, what things mean in different terms, like green for candles are meant for prosperity and for money drawing or things of that nature, or even healing for some people. So we will put all of that inside of our book of shadows.
So does each person have their own spell book?
Yes.
Oh, so your spell book is your very own compilation.
Right, and a lot of times family members will hand them down, and if their own children do not practice, they will hand them down to someone else that does practice.
Dorothy and the Wicked Witch. Dorothy dropped a house on her. She took her out.
Right.
Okay, Glinda was a better, that's the image a lot of us have. And then Dorothy threw the water and she melted and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
The images of a witch, the green face, the nose and all that. Do you know anything about how that began? And would you share that with us, please?
What happened was years ago, and I'm talking centuries ago, when someone was deemed or accused of being a witch, what they would do is they would torture them to get them to admit to being a witch. They would beat them and do all kinds of damage to them. And so they would end up finally admitting, saying that they were a witch just to stop the beatings. And then they would take and make them walk through to go to get hung or whatever type. Well, witches were actually burnt or hung more than they were burnt at the stake.
Okay.
And so what they would do is, as they were being brought to wherever they were going to be put to death, they would have this green tinge to their faces from all the bruising. Then their noses would more often than not be broken, so they would have the weird shaping nose. And so people started getting this image of a witch, but it was because that's what they would look like after they were beaten for days on end, just so that they would admit to being a witch.
Now, I had a chance to look at the Salem Witch Trials, Time Life magazine.
Right.
And it went back into the history of witches, not only from 1692, but back to the 1400s and beyond.
Right.
What I discovered was, first of all, the church's involvement, they're inextricably linked together.
Right.
And that women, excuse me, were deemed to be witches, that they were older women because they were thought to not been able to attract a male, and therefore they were more susceptible to the seductions of Satan the older they got. And especially if the woman was outspoken, intelligent, and refused to go along with the program of the day. I never knew how widespread it was back to the Netherlands, and just thousands of women, particularly women, have been persecuted and killed because somebody deemed them to be a witch. And I did not know the connection of the church in witchcraft and witches, where money was made, with all fairness to the church. If it's wrong, it's in this magazine.
Right.
Where money was made by the churches to clear the community of the witches, and people paid the church to get rid of these evil spirits around. When you think about the history of what you practice today, much changed from back then till now, or are we still stuck in the ignorance of the past?
A lot of people are still stuck in the ignorance. The only difference is not everyone is killed. There are still people that are killed for being witches. It's, usually in different countries, but, occasionally you will still find it. Even in the United States, there's occasionally someone will be killed because they're a witch, but it won't be actually stated that that's why. But in other countries, witches are still actually put to death. And it's all because a lot of times it's because they don't like the person. You will have women that don't get along, and if because one is in the community, more recognized at a higher level, they can actually say, well, that one is a witch, and then they will be persecuted as a witch. And that's what happened, centuries ago, is if you had a higher standing in the community and you didn't like someone, you would just accuse them of being a witch, and then they would be put to death, and then they didn't deal with them anymore. That's how it came about.
Just a jealousy.
Yeah.
A plain old-fashioned green-eyed monster.
Right. And if anyone and then if somebody wasn't liked because they were smart, oh, there must be a witch. That's how they know everything.
How did this fall on women, though? I mean, why weren't men deemed? Is it because men were in charge of the institutions, the churches, and all of that?
There actually was some men that were put to death, but you're correct. The majority were women, and it was because men were in charge, and they didn't want any women trying to take control. So the women were still put down, and it was easier to take and convince the community to kill the female than it was for a group of men to get together and say, okay, yep, that male is guilty, let's put him to death. It was easier to just put the females to death.
Now, in the 21st century that we live in, there are magazines and medical information and all of that. Hopefully enlighten people today understand the female and the menstruation cycle and all of that. Back a century ago or 2 centuries ago, that wasn't completely understood.
Correct.
And women were viewed as unclean and unsafe because of their menstruation cycles.
Right.
But you have a different take on that as a witch. Your take is the fertility of the female. Would you explain that?
Okay, what it is going back centuries ago, it started off as women, when it was their cycle, they would get together and try to help each other out. They would take and exchange ideas and different ways of healing, of trying to control the pain. And then when it was childbirth time, they would help each other during childbirth. And they kept the men away so that they just didn't want the men near them at that time due to it was, more personal to the females to help each other. And then as time came on, the men switched it because they didn't want it to be known that they were pushed away. So they started putting it on the reverse, that they didn't want the women near them during that time. So that was part of with that. Now in witchcraft, though, we believe that the menstrual blood is actually the most powerful fluid or most powerful thing out there to do spell work, because that menstrual blood is what brings birth about. That is what helps to control bringing another human being into being. So that's where we believe it's the most powerful thing. So without that cycle happening, childbirth couldn't happen. And so that's the cleansing of the womb, of it taking, discharging it, but it's very powerful, because if that didn't happen every month, then childbirth couldn't happen.
Let's talk about spells. Have you worked any spells?
Oh, yes.
Well, tell me, recently we were just talking about a church or a daycare, and we were talking about a person trying to sell their home.
Correct.
And you got involved, and share that with our viewing audience, please.
There was a couple of them. The daycare they were having a lot of negativity, of different noises, of kids when they were in a certain area would get agitated very easily and start fights, and they would move the toys around figuring it was the toys, and no matter what was in that one area, the kids would argue and fight for no reason at all. And you're talking about anywhere from 2 to 5-year-olds doing this. So even though they were in the basement of the church, they actually came to me and asked me if I would do a cleansing. So I went there and I cleansed it, and they've been perfectly fine since. Now, I've also had an issue of a woman that came to me, and she'd been trying for 2 years to sell her home. No luck, no response whatsoever. Did a spell for her, well, actually helped her to do a spell. Because it's more powerful when the person themselves does the spell, because it has their intent, what they really want in the spell work. And you need that intent, you need that want to be in the spell. So helped her to do it, and 3 days later she got the offer on her home, and then she's already, now at this point it's already been sold, and she was able to purchase her home that she has always wanted.
What is entailed, I think of that scene in The Exorcist, where the first one with Linda Blair, where the priest is throwing the holy water and commanding the devil to come out of the child. What do you do when you do a cleansing? Do you take your spell book? Do you take a potion? What do you take to the site to cleanse it?
There's different ways to do it. Depends on how bad the place is. If it is just a simple case of negativity in the facility, it's taking some type of an herb and you burn it, and you walk around and you are making sure to get in all of the area, walking the perimeter inside and getting around all of the area with the smoke. And then you either bring it outside or open a window so that that smoke can escape, and that smoke draws the negativity with it out. Now, these are certain herbs that you would use. White sage seems to be the most popular because that's what a lot of people are using, but it's getting to the point where they're not able to keep up with the growing of it because so many people are using it. So some other things to use are like Palo Santo, which is a tree, and you can burn some of that. Mugwort is another one. Mugwort actually grows everywhere. It's just a weed to people. They just, when it grows in their yard, they just cut it down and rip it out and throw it away. And not knowing you could actually dry it, burn it, and it will take negativity out of your home. Then the Native Americans used to use tobacco, and they still do. It's just, we try not to, I'm actually part Abenaki, so using tobacco to me is not disrespecting Native Americans using it, but sometimes you do watch what one you're using so that you're not disrespecting another tradition. Mm-hmm. So not everyone will use the tobacco, but then that negativity will follow the smoke out, and it leaves with it. There's other times where you have to be a little bit stronger, and there's certain spells that you might have to say while you're in there, in which case then you would bring your spell book, or you would have it written on another piece of parchment paper. Then there's other times where I've actually used some hoodoo magic and use that to cleanse an area. So it kind of depends on what is in there before you can say how to get rid of it.
Do you take, I don't know, for want of a better phrase, and I'm not trying to be funny or fresh here, but do you take requests from people to cast spells on people that are not good spells?
I actually don't do the spell work for other people. If they come in and they request, well, I need help, I need this type of a spell, I will take and point them in the direction. I will give them spells, but I will not give them spells that will harm another person. I do have spells that will do that, but I will not give them out. I don't believe in doing something of that nature. I've done spells on someone who had done something wrong to me, and the spell I had done was just a protection spell on me so she couldn't harm me anymore, but it had an effect that whatever she tried to do to me would leave me and go back to her. And because of that, right after I did that, within a week, she lost her job, she lost her home, her car broke down, all within 1 week's time. And that was within a week of me doing that spell. So after I had done that, I decided that I was going to be very careful with what I do, because I didn't mean for that much to happen, but I didn't even do it against her. I just did a protection against myself. But even the way I worded it, it ended up being giving back to her what she was trying to do to me. And so if that's what happened to her, that was what she was trying to do to me. But I don't like that much negativity going on to anyone.
Let's talk about animals. Most American households have a dog or a cat or two or three.
Right.
The black cat, Halloween is a symbol, and it's a symbol of evil. It's the witch's pet.
Right.
Do you cast spells on animals, or do you cleanse animals?
Do cleanse animals. Spell-wise, I don't do spells on animals because I don't believe in affecting anyone's free will, even that of an animal. However, there are healing that you could do on them, which is usually more towards Reiki, because I'm also a Reiki master.
And what is that?
Reiki is energy healing.
Okay.
It's an alternative to doing regular medicine or Western medicine. It's where you actually will exchange energy and align theirs so that it can start healing themselves more properly. So I will do that occasionally on the animals, and it's just there's a spirit of Reiki that you use, and you use on the animals, and you're not even actually touching the animals a lot of times when you're doing it. Your hands are just hovering around them, and it's just pushing some energy into them to help them to start to heal. And that has done. However, there are spells where if an animal is lost, you could do a spell to have the animal return home. So that type of spell has been done before. And I have helped people with that, where they're able to do that to, get their whatever animal that happened to run away to come back home on its own.
Tarot cards.
Yes.
What are tarot cards, and why do you use them?
Okay, tarot cards have been around for a very long time, and basically they're used to help tell what's going to happen in the future or what's currently going on in your life, and it could also be used to take and tell you what has happened in your past that is affecting your future. So the cards are broken up into major and minor arcana, and the major are the ones that tell major life events. The minor are more of the day-to-day issues. And they're, like I said, used to help foretell the future. However, there's a difference between just about anyone picking them up and using them. They do come with a book that explains this is what the card means, type of deal. Anyone can take them, use them, and put them out in the spread that they give and say, okay, this is what the author says this card means, and do that on someone. However, someone that actually has very in-depth into them, which most witches do, we will look at the card and tell you your future, but yet not tell you necessarily what's in the book. And that's because we have a more stronger connection with the cards, where we look at the picture of what's on the card, and the card will talk to us that way, by what stands out maybe necessarily in the picture and different things of that nature, and it will just tell us what it is we should be saying.
Is there a connection between tarot card reading and palm reading? Do you do palm reading?
I don't personally do palm reading, but it's very similar in the fact that it does help to tell the future. And it is, again, there's a different interpretation. You have people that could do it by just saying, okay, this is what the book says, this line means. However, if you get someone that has really get involved and knows what it is spiritually in them, then they could take and tell you but it will be totally different maybe than what the book is saying, or they can go further in depth than what the book is saying.
What role does love play in witchcraft?
In witchcraft, love is still the traditional. We have different ways of doing things. We have the version, though, where we don't believe we should affect anyone's free will. However, there are some people that will always go against whatever is traditional. But we believe everyone has their own free will, so that they shouldn't really go and force them into a relationship that's not meant to be. So we will go through and do spell work, but more of for us to help people find their true love versus having a specific person come into their life. And then we believe that there is soulmates and things of that nature, but just because you have a soulmate doesn't mean you will end up with them in this lifetime. It's something that some lifetimes you will end up with them and other times you won't.
Yeah. Could you please tell us what the CWPN stands for? What is that?
The CWPN is an organization. It's Connecticut Wiccan Pagan Network. And it's an organization in Connecticut of witches that get together and they hold rituals. And they have different events to take and help to celebrate and get people together, so that those that can't find others of the witches and things, or Druids or whatever, Norse religion, whatever religion you follow, you can actually get to go to an event and find others that are in the same religion as you.
How does one become a witch?
It's very simple. It's just study. A lot of it is when you feel in your heart that you should be a witch, then you should take and start learning. Find others that are witches, get books on it, start reading on it. It's all about knowledge. The more knowledge you have, that's what you need. And the number one thing that all witches need to do the most is meditate. When you meditate, it calms you down, it takes and centers your body and gets you in one with nature. And that will help you the most with being a witch.
Really?
Yes.
Meditation.
Right.
And read.
Right.
And learn.
Correct.
and have an open mind.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There was a poem, and I almost never remembered, but it said, snug lie those who slumber beneath conviction's roof. Their floors are sturdy lumber, their windows weatherproof. But I sleep cold forever, and cold sleep all my kind. For I was born to shiver in the draft from an open mind. And that's the way we should take a look at what witchcraft is. And do you have anything you would like to leave with our audience tonight about witches, witchcraft, and how we look at you and how we accept you in our society, or ways that we could find that we connect? Because as you were talking about burning incense, that's very much a part of the Catholic Church. Right. They burn incense even today. So those century-old kinds of things. Right. So we are connected on many points from what you were talking about today, the nature and the Indians loving the land and taking care of the land, that sort of thing. So one of the most powerful commercials I ever saw was in the 60s with the old Indian in the canoe, and he's riding through a polluted water, and there's one tear coming down his eye because the land had become so polluted. Right. So you have explained to me tonight and to my listening, viewing audience, that you're about protecting and preserving and taking care of things, not destroying things. Right. You're about helping people, not about casting spells on people that cause them harm or may even cause them their lives. Did I get that part right? Right. Yes, you did. How would I contact the CWPN and try to get some knowledge going there? What would I do? They actually have a website. They're on Facebook. There's also a website
called Witchvox. It's WITCHVOXX.com. And they actually have where all the different covens are. There's different stores that are listed in there. There's different organizations. So different things of that nature you can go to, and it will help them find different locations. Again, I think I had said I own a store, Cauldron's Flame, in Plainville. They can always come down, call. I have no problem sitting and talking with people and explaining to them what it is about. And, you know, just people should have an open mind. And one of the main things of the Christian belief was always love thy neighbor. Well, everybody is still each other's neighbor, so why take and harm someone? If you think back to Christianity with Jesus, he took and went around. He did not discriminate against anybody. He loved everybody equally. And back then, there was no such thing as Christianity. There was all different types of religions. There was pagans back then.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here tonight. That's all the time we have for tonight's show. My thanks to my guest, Phoenix Moon. Everybody has a story. What's yours? Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, good night.